Do you know how hard it is to sometimes get excited about some of these NAS storage products that I talk about on the channel? Don't get me wrong, I am all about data, I am all about networking, but at the same time, sometimes you just see the same thing over and over again and they just change the damn model ID and the brand label. However, today I want to talk about something that genuinely got my interest, and that is this. This is from Aoostar. This is the TB4S-OC. This is their new flash expansion device. Now, we say expansion device, that means that if you are someone that owns an Aoostar NAS or an Aoostar mini PC that has an Oculink port, user can take advantage of this. And again, even if you're not an Aoostar user and you're using something else that has an Oculink port, this will allow you to add 4 M.2 NVMe's directly into your system, taking advantage of either USB Type 4 connectivity or Oculink connectivity there. So again, you're talking either 40 gigabits per second or 64 gigabits per second, rocking out at around $169 to $179 without the SSDs inside. This allows you to expand NAS systems or even have DAS systems. So many of you, when I was making videos about TerraMaster's D5 and D8 DAS NVMe expansion system, were like, oh, cool idea, bit large, would rather something dedicated to NVMe. Well, you've got it. Now, the M2 NVMe's inside, there's 4 of them, and they are on a Gen 3x1 lane each. That means they've only got around 800 to 1,000 megabytes per second to play with each. And it doesn't have hardware RAID inside. You're going to have to take advantage of your own system, be it a NAS, a DAS, PC, or whatever. You're going to take advantage of its own hardware controller there, or just standard RAID 0, RAID 1 architecture to sort of zip it all together there. Now, it's got individual LEDs there on the front for each of the individual M.2 NVMe's inside. It has a cooling system inside, along with ventilation panels on 2 of the sides to sort of draw out that air as needed, as well as the fan based on the base of the model as well. Each SSD bay supports up to 8 terabyte 2280 length SSDs inside, and it measures at just a little over 10 centimeters top and down, and measures at just 3 centimeters high. So again, great scaling all the way through. Weight wise, you're looking at about 2 to 250 grams of weight there, so again, nothing really to play with, but it does have an external power, and that was the one thing that really bummed me out. I was kind of hoping that this could take advantage of enough oomph via the USB4 connectivity power to at least keep it running, but the 4 M.2 NVMe seems to have pushed it over the edge. It arrives with an external PSU that it arrives with. Unfortunately, not a USB-C connector. That kind of bummed me out, I've got to say. But at the very least, it is a discreet, very lightweight external PSU. So again, not too much to be angry about. But one thing that I will like to talk about in terms of power, and this was one of the reasons why I was interested, and I would argue very impressed by the way Aoostar approached this, and that is, take for example this. This is the Aoostar GEM10. We did a NAS video on this because it's got 3 M.2 NVMe slots inside, talking about it for Proxmox, TrueNAS, or anything like. This is a fast, compact flash server there, but it has an Oculink port there. So when this came out, I was really, really pleased that if we wanted to, we can go ahead, connect it into there, slam it into the Aoostar, and then boom. We've gone ahead and we've added 4 more M.2 NVMe's of storage there. But you're thinking, ugh, power, a lot of cables. Well, it even arrives with the power splitter. Now, there's going to be mixed feelings. There's going to be some of you that don't like the fact that having both of these connected to one outlet could result in one down, all down. But still, nonetheless, the fact the system arrives with a dedicated barrel connector, which, by the way, I would argue is largely supported on the majority of DIY or OS-free NAS systems, alongside a dedicated connector for the system going directly into a barrel out, is going to make this way more convenient than the majority of other expansions we've talked about. It also arrives with a 240 watt, 40 gigabits per second USB Type-C cable there for keeping the system running, and you're going to need that extra power cable, remember. You can utilize both cables together. It's, in fact, when I was utilizing it, that's when I got my best results, having both of them connected together. But you can't really use one port going onto something else and maybe the USB going to something else. It doesn't really work that way. Now, when we have the system set up, we can go through some power consumption, we can go through some temps, we can go through some performance. We set up Unraid on the GEM10 there and connected the device with the 4 M.2 NVMe's via the Oculink USB connector there, and we ran individual tests on the SSDs. The performance we saw on one SSD there was 788 megabytes per second write, and that was a 1 gig repeated test file. And we saw that reaching a high of 46 degrees, and during read operations we achieved 822 megabytes per second. That was the maximum performance, and that was 47 degrees temperature. Now, when we were transferring data between the two, we did see a drop there. We went down to 265 megabytes per second, and that was again over the course of 90 individual 1 gig transfers, and a performance of 41 to 42 degrees, so not too bad. Now, a lot of those performance numbers are of course down to the fact that this system is utilizing M.2 speeds at 3 times 1. So that obviously brings down the overhead in terms of overall performance. But as a means to expand storage via Oculink and USB4, this is a really impressive device. But with, I would argue, one kind of bad caveat, which unfortunately isn't Aoostar's fault and is going to be something we're going to have to deal with, and that is this is not backwards compatible. So you can't use it with USB 3.1, 3.2, 3.2 Gen 2, whatever. You have to go minimum Oculink and USB 4. You can't go lower than that. And USB 4, although it is growing increasingly common on DIY and OS-free NAS solutions, again, we made a whole video about it, it's still not what I would call ubiquitous everywhere, and with Oculink, even less so. Now, when we raided all 4 drives together, we only saw performance of around 2.4 to 2.5 gigabytes per second, but because that was internal, that isn't something you're ever going to realize unless you're running a system that's perhaps maybe 2 times 10 GBE. As this system only has 2.5 GBE times 2, you're never going to realize those external performance numbers if you RAID the drives together. But at least individual drives there, we're getting very, very close to maximizing each of their individual 3 times 1 lanes there. And I think if you wanted to run individual files and folders and setups outside of Aoostar deployment and more towards a Windows or expanding another NAS perhaps, for those that are compatible, this is going to be an interesting proposal there. A price tag again between $169 and $179. It's not hugely expensive, but just keep in mind that right now this is very early days, and even on Aoostar's own website, they do state quite heavily that it's only compatible with their systems currently, and testing is still ongoing. So do double check before you go with any third-party hardware configurations that you can utilize this with, that it has been tested as compatible. I did manage to get this seen by a desktop machine, but again, the performance numbers weren't really there, and I do think a lot of that was to do with optimization on that side and Oculink, so I'm still holding my breath on that. Nonetheless, as an indication of where they're going with their solutions, and of course, now that we're talking about Aoostar a lot more with their NAS solutions getting smaller and bigger all the time, like the one up there behind my head, it's nice to see a brand that is taking NAS quite seriously coming out of the likes of their own website, AliExpress, and more. There's just so many mini PC vendors that are trying to break into the NAS world. I like ones that are at least going to the trouble of building their own kit, actually making tailored solutions, and arguably making the things that people are asking for. But what do you guys think? There's a written description, written review, I should say, in the description if you want to check that out, linked in below. There's also links to get hold of this device and similar in the description below. So if you have found this video helpful and you are going to go to those shops anyway, make sure those two things are true, please use the links in the description, because using those will result in a small commission to me and Eddie here at NAScompares, and it allows us to keep doing what we do. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.